All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, Get to Know Camtasia, not to be confused with the typical getting started with Camtasia. My name is Ryan H. I'm an instructional designer on our customer education team. I'm going to be hosting today's webinar, and I'm joined by my coworker, Jason Vlad, who's also an instructional designer, master trainer on our customer education team. Hi, Jason.
Hey, Ryan, and hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us this afternoon, morning, or wherever you happen to be.
All right, so today's presentation is based on some feedback that we received from previous webinars where people have asked for more details about some of the features of Camtasia. So the hope is that this session will help you better understand what tools are included with Camtasia and how might you utilize them in your video projects. Does that kind of explain it, Jason, or would you add any more to that?
Yeah, that's pretty good. So in your typical getting started webinar, we walk through the product and we make a video and try and answer all your questions at the same time. It's a chock full hour, and we definitely don't get to all the things we want to get to. So we took that getting started webinar and broke it into its two components. One is going to be today's first running of Get to Know Camtasia, where we're literally going to walk through the entire product. We may not take a whole hour, but we definitely want to make sure we're answering your questions and clicking on the menus that you're not familiar with. And then the new iteration of getting started with Camtasia is going to be that creation of a video process from start to finish. And I believe we run the first one of those, Ryan, next week. So make sure you check out techsmith.com/webinars. Let's get ourselves into what you're here for, and that's getting to know Camtasia. So we're going to start here, and I'll go ahead and turn off my camera so that you get your full screen action here. We're going to start with this. This is the welcome window that shows up when you launch Camtasia for the first time. This is actually a reiteration, a new iteration of the welcome window of the past. It's a great starting place for anyone who's using Camtasia because you can actually perform a lot of different activities right from this welcome window. First and foremost, the menu that's selected by default is the Get Started menu. You can do everything from starting a brand new project. So this would open up the Camtasia editor in a blank state, ready for you to bring in content, add any tools from the side. This is a blank starting place. You can start a brand new project from a template, either the default template that's inside of Camtasia when it ships, or any template that you might have created or downloaded from the TechSmith Asset Store. You can start a video right from the template point as well. You can start a brand new recording, which would launch the Camtasia recorder to record your screen and anything you say and do on the screen at that point. Or if you have a project saved on your machine, you could open that project from this button here. Or if it's recent, like a lot of my projects tend to be, it's going to be in the list here underneath the recent projects section of this tab. So it's a great place to start for just about any of your Camtasia needs right from the Get Started tab in the welcome window. We also have a learning tab that Ryan and myself and other members of the customer education team here at TechSmith are responsible for. And this is actually a great place to start your Camtasia journey as far as learning. Everything from a welcome video to a series of making your first video type styles of videos, and everything from learning how to use callouts to exploring the timeline to looking at the canvas, as well as a link to our entire tutorial page that our team maintains. We're constantly updating that, especially as new versions of Camtasia come out and things get updated. And then at the bottom, you also have opportunities to learn more things, which is a secondary link to our tutorial page, a link to our help articles and help documents that are crafted by other members of the customer education team, as well as a link to our webinars page, which is possibly how you found today's webinar. We have webinars scheduled out about a month and a half in advance, but we have plans for the balance of this entire year. So keep checking techsmith.com/webinars or click on the link from the welcome window. Last but certainly not least, we want to be able to help people out when they need it. So there is a help menu here in the welcome window. Everything from our online help, which is a documentation and how-to guides, to our community support section where you can ask questions, put feature requests through, or talk to other users of TechSmith products to discover different ways to solve your problems or how to make new projects based on people's advice. We also have a link to our awesome tech support team based in Okemos, Michigan. And we also include both a Windows and Mac keyboard shortcut poster link. So you are a person that has a visual learning capability and you want to put a hanging keyboard shortcut poster up in your office, whether it be at home or an actual office, you can click and download those from here as well. So from that point, I actually am going to do two different things. We're going to start by walking through the brand new redesigned Camtasia recorder. And at the end of that, we'll stop for our first set of questions, Ryan, just to see if anybody's got anything up to this point. So I'm going to launch the recorder and just bring it up on my screen. This is the brand new redesigned Camtasia recorder. And what I'd like to tell people is when they pull up the recorder for the first time, they generally want to ask themselves 3 questions. What do I want people to be able to see? Do I want them to see me? And can they hear me? And that corresponds with each section of the recorder here. First, what do I want people to be able to see? This is where I can choose which screen I want recorded. So if you have a single monitor setup, like you're working from a laptop or a desktop computer that has a single monitor, this will be the screen that you capture. However, underneath this drop-down menu, if you have multiple screens like I happen to have at my setup, I can pick one of the other screens. I can also choose a custom region, which allows me to click and drag over a space on the screen so that I can capture a specific part of my window. I can choose typical widescreen formats, which we have here at 720p and 1080p, which are your most common formats for distributing and publishing videos to the internet. And then we actually have some pre-chosen regions based on some social media destinations, everything from an Instagram video, which is square, if you weren't aware of that. And you also have a cover video format for Facebook. You can choose any number of these and make a recording of that. Now, a question people ask me is, well, what if I just want to record my webcam and I don't want to record my screen? That's what these toggle switchers are for. You can actually toggle them on and off if you want to record screen or not your screen. So that's the first question. What do I want people to be able to see? The second question is, can they see me? So I'm going to toggle this on. This is going to be my really good camera I've got here. And this is my ability to turn on my webcam. So Camtasia can record your screen and your webcam at the exact same time. And when it comes into the editor, as we'll see later on, it shows up as a PIP or a picture-in-picture style video, where it's in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, but you can then move that around, manipulate it, twist it, change it, zoom it, fade it, whatever you'd like to do. But Camtasia can record it at the exact same time as your screen recording so that you have the option of adding a little bit more of a human element to your videos later on. If you have multiple cameras plugged into your computer, like I happen to have, you can choose between those or amongst those right within this drop-down menu as well. For the rest of this part of the video or the webinar, I'm going to toggle off my camera. So see you guys in just a little bit. But that answers the first 2 questions. What do I want people to be able to see? And can they see me? The third option, the third section of the recorder is, can they hear me? This is personally one of the most important parts of a video. So we have research that says people might hang around for a blurry video or a blurry presentation, but if they can't hear the presenter, they leave. So your audio source is really important. And this is where you can choose what microphone that you want to use. I happen to have 3 plugged into my computer. One that's my really big one sitting in front of my face right now. My headset has a mic, and so does one of my webcams. But I can choose which microphone I want to record my voice with right from this section. And just like before, if I, for some reason, just want to record a silent video where I don't need any voiceover, I can toggle that off as well. Last but not least is the system audio. And this is one of the most misunderstood parts of Camtasia. All this is if you're going to make a recording and there is sounds from your computer that would typically come from your speakers, you can capture that with Camtasia as well. The things I'm looking at is when I'm creating tutorials or how-to guides, I'm trying to indicate whether or not you should or shouldn't be doing something. And those typically come with some sort of indicator noise, some beep or ping or bang. And that allows people to hear those sounds while you're making your video. 9 times out of 10, though, I don't use system audio. So for me, I toggle it off and I have that control completely here from the editor, or excuse me, from the recorder. You also have a couple of menu options in the recorder as well. Underneath the capture menu up here, you can toggle things on and off, just like the toggle system below each of the sections. So I know I've got my screen turned on and I've got my microphone turned on, and those are represented by these check marks here underneath this menu. And then the second menu is the tools section, where there's an options menu. We're going to pull that up because there's a couple things in this options menu that people tend to ask about. By default, these 4 workflow items are checked on when you launch Camtasia, and you can toggle them off at any time. One is to show the recorder countdown. That means when I hit this big red record button, I'm going to get a 3, 2, 1 countdown. And then after it finishes, we'll start recording. I always leave this turned on. I always have a countdown. It's helpful for me to get myself ready for the video. The second one that's checked is restore cursor location after pause. That means if I pause my recording, maybe I forgot to turn off my phone or someone's knocking on my door, and I happen to move my mouse around or open up another program to check a quick email and then close it. You can rest assured that if this is checked and you resume your recording, the mouse is going to start in the position that you left off, and it's not going to jump across the screen. It'll start right where you left off so that you can have continuity with your recording. Do not capture recorder on the screen is checked by default. That means the recorder itself will not be in your recording, which unless you're teaching Camtasia is a good thing. It'll get itself out of the way. And then by default, it's set that when you stop the recording, the recorder is going to close and the editor is going to pop open. If this is toggled off, the editor will still open, but the recorder will stay in place. And then secondarily, we have a files tab. This one is really interesting for people that like to have a lot of control over their files. By default, Camtasia is going to automatically name your recordings as they're completed as soon as you hit stop. And it's going to put where they're stored, which by default is a Camtasia folder that's created in your documents folder. Same on the Mac side. Inside of your documents folder, there's going to be a folder called Camtasia, and that's where they're going to be stored. If you would prefer them to be stored somewhere else, you can do that from this menu here by clicking on the folder. And or if you want to have the ability to prompt yourself for a name, if you want to save the files with something specific, you can do that as well. The automatic file naming convention is a timestamp of sorts. So you know the date and time that it was created. It's a lot of information just inside the recorder, Ryan. Let me take a quick sip of water and see if anybody has any questions before we move ourselves into the editor itself to take a look at all the tools inside there.
All right. Yes. So I do have a few questions, at least to start. And first of all, Janice asked, with system audio, I have actually a couple of them with system audio. With system audio, can it record background music as well?
So the general answer for that is it depends. There are a lot of programs. For example, if someone was trying to do something nefarious and record a movie or a music video off of certain sites, a lot of sites have that materials blocked because it's their copyright, right? So by default, it totally is dependent on the program you're using and the system that it's recording from. It does capture things, Ryan, like if you're going to record a webinar, if it's played throughout a webinar, it's going to capture that information because in the world we live in now, there's a lot of people capturing Zoom webinar, Teams calls, Citrix WebEx sorts of things, Skype calls. All those sorts of things can be captured with Camtasia. And if you want not only your voice, but the people you're talking with or the presenter's voices as well, you would definitely want to have system audio toggled on.
And if it's background music that you are wanting to put in your own video, then that's something you can actually not worry about doing during the recording and just use the add background music during the editing process. Is that what you'd probably recommend?
Absolutely, 100%. I would rather add that source content in the editor so that I had most control over it, and then be able to place it and fade it in and fade it out, or use a lot of tools inside of Camtasia where I have control over that. That's correct.
All right, great. So Jerry asked a question, which I get this one a lot, actually. If someone is giving him a training session on or using Zoom or some other platform, can he record it using Camtasia? And if so, how would he go about doing that?
Yeah, so the way I would do that is I would open up the recorder just like I have here. I would turn on my screen and make sure it's the screen that the Zoom presentation is going to be presented on. I would turn off my own webcam because I don't need me. I would most likely turn off my microphone unless I'm going to be engaging or interacting with the presenter. I would be able to have that on or off at that point and then toggle on the system audio. So at the very least, the screen is going to be turned on, especially the screen that's going to have the Zoom presentation going on, and the system audio needs to be turned on so that you can hear the presenter and all the information they're looking to share with you.
Perfect. All right, 2 more quick questions.
Sure.
If you're working with 2 screens, can they both be recorded at the same time? Stephen asked this.
So they can, using the drop-down menu, you can use this custom region to choose a region. But what you're going to end up with is a very, very wide recording, and that's not really advantageous for most people. It can be done. I just don't recommend it. I'd love to know the reasoning why people would choose to do this, even if they're recording a widescreen format, or if they've got an ultra wide monitor. It's going to degrade, right? You're not going to have a nice, crisp quality recording because you're trying to stretch it out over so much space. So the short answer is yes, you can with the region select. Long answer is, but I wouldn't. I'd find a different way to create that content if possible, but that's my opinion.
And you can always, if you have multiple monitors, you can drag windows over into the recording window when you want to and stuff like that. So
like if I brought this one from my other monitor, hey, that's that form I was asking people to fill out. Anyway, you can do that as well. In fact, that's how we do a lot of our content. We bring things in from the side, or things, if you've only got one monitor, you can bring things up that have been minimized as well.
Yeah. Great. All right. Last question. I'm not 100% sure if this is possible or how to do this. If someone doesn't see the getting started pop-up window when they start Camtasia, like maybe they've turned it off, or if there's a way to uncheck it so it doesn't show, is there a way to get it to turn it back on or access it?
If they're using Camtasia 2021, which is what I'm on today, there actually is no way to turn it off. So if you're on Camtasia 2021, and it's not showing up, I would reach out to our tech support team, because that sounds like something's not kosher. However, in previous versions, 2019 and 2020, you could toggle it off at the initial stage. So if we can find out what version they're on, we might be able to answer that question a little bit better.
Gotcha. Okay. I think I'm going to turn it back over to you.
All right. All right, so what I'm going to do now, we've gone through the recorder. And of course, if you have further questions about the recorder, no problem. You can definitely ask later on. We're going to go into the editor, and I'm going to go into it by pulling up an existing project that I was working on earlier, just to give you a sense of what it looks like, what the editor looks like with a project inside of it. Now, reminder, we are not going to make a video today. That is going to happen in other sessions, but we are going to use a project that has a video in it to show you around. So this is the Camtasia editor. And I like to show it like this because there's a quick way to walk around it so you get a sense of what is happening here in the editor. When you open it up for the first time and you have no project, it's going to look like this. It's going to look blank and ready for your creation. But the Camtasia editor itself is made up of 4 different sections. We have the media bin and tool area over here on the left. We have the canvas sitting here in the middle. We have a properties drawer that will change dynamically depending on what you have selected over here on the right. And at the bottom, we have our timeline. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk through each section of this, and I'm actually going to bring that project back up so that we can use that in reference to any of the tools. So first and foremost, we're going to talk about the media bin. So the media bin on the left is where the content that you're going to use for this particular video is kept. In this case, this is a screen recording video. It's a recording of where to find the tutorials on the TechSmith website, along with my webcam. So that content, that TREC, TechSmith recording file, is going to be in the media bin. Other things you could put in your media bin is other screen recordings, videos from other sources, music, PowerPoint documentation, so slides from PowerPoints, images, a lot of different things can be brought into the media bin. And the one question I get asked the most is, how do I bring stuff into the media bin? There's several ways, but by far the easiest, in the lower left-hand corner of the media bin, there is a plus button that you can click on to be able to import media that is saved on your machine. Right below the media bin button on the left, there is a library button. Now, the library is really, really powerful. By default, you're going to have a Camtasia library that ships with the product. This is going to be content that you can use in videos right away. Everything from icons associated with different topics. We've got buildings and business and education and media, all kinds of different icons. We also have animated introductions, animated lower thirds, motion backgrounds, music tracks, and outros. All of the items in this library that come shipping with Camtasia are royalty free. meaning you can use them in your projects right away without having to pay any extra fees. You don't have to go source them from somewhere. They're ready for you and available to use right now. One thing to note is the intros and the lower thirds and the outros are all customizable. You do not have to use them in their state that you bring them in. You can customize them to your heart's content. And if people are interested in learning a little bit more about that, we can talk a little bit about that later on, but you can customize them. At the top of the library, there is a drop-down menu, and underneath that, you will find, once you create them, other libraries, user-created libraries. The way I describe this to most people is, think of this like a pantry in your kitchen. Inside of the pantry are all items you might want to use across multiple projects. For example, I use a library here called the Vlad library. It's my last name. And I have the TechSmith colors, the TechSmith branding icons, all available to me because I want to use them in more than one project. And that's the biggest distinction between the media bin and the library. The media bin is for media that you're going to use in this project right now. And the library is where you can source material from to use in other projects across multiple projects. So this is where I might save my branding information. This is where I might save music that I'm going to use for lots of other projects in the future. It may even be where I store, colors and imagery. And well, here's one of a profile picture that I might want to use. Man, I forgot I had a beard like that. I miss those days. Anyway, you have all that capable at your fingertips if you create your own customized libraries, which is easy to do by going underneath the drop-down menu in the library, going to Manage Library, and then you can create, export, delete, create a brand new one, download assets, all from the library drop-down. For those interested, we are going to host a webinar later on this summer all about customizing your library. Okay. The next thing we're going to talk about is the favorites menu, and mine is empty right now because I just did a brand new installation of Camtasia. So the favorites menu we'll come back to in just a second, but once you find other tools and other parts of Camtasia that you want to use on a regular basis and you don't want to go searching for it later on, you can favorite those items and have them automatically added to your favorites menu. Speaking of favorites, the next tab down is the Annotations tab. And this is where we start getting into a lot of what makes Camtasia Camtasia. The familiarity of it is here. Callouts are what Camtasia is known for. And a callout is the ability to add an annotation, some sort of image right to your recording that gives information, draws attention, all those sorts of things. For example, you've probably seen arrows like this show up on people's videos where they have text inside them that are pointing to certain things or drawing your attention, or they've been rotated or resized, or they fly in. All these things are done through callouts. And one thing that people tend to not know about Camtasia is when you open up this callouts menu, there's actually a lot you can do within here if you just take a little bit of time to explore. The first thing you're going to see is there's only a couple of options and a couple of colors because by default, Camtasia opens up the basic style option of callouts. If you use this drop-down menu and go to all, you're going to see many different options that are brought into Camtasia by default. So everything from basic text to different shapes, different colors, and different styles. And what makes this really powerful is you don't have to rely on just these colors and shapes as either. If you bring them onto your canvas, like this arrow, maybe like I said, I wanted to bring it in here. I spoke a little earlier about that properties panel over here on the right. It changes dynamically based on what media you have selected on the canvas. And I can change it by going into things like the color or the shape of it. All those can be changed in the properties panel. And we'll do a little bit more of that later on. The thing I definitely want to call out, though, is the callouts also start on the callout tab up here at the top. There's so much more underneath the callouts menu that is available to you, such as this tab here, which opens up the arrows and lines. You have shapes. You have what we call blur and highlight. So if you wanted to blur content on your screen, you can do that as well and resize it. This is something people ask about all the time to, protect information. You've got a spotlight tool, a highlighting tool, and even a pixelization tool. So you can do kind of a more modern take on a blur, but make it look all pixelated and have that be a modern take as well. All these things are found by clicking on multiple tabs across the top of the callouts. You even have sketch motion callouts, which are shapes that look like they're being drawn on the screen, as well as keystroke callouts, which you can type in keystrokes if you're teaching someone that has keyboard shortcuts or anything along those lines. So in a nutshell, that is the callouts menu, but a deeper dive because some people don't move themselves past this initial stage of a basic callout menu. So make sure you explore those as well. Next, transitions. So with Camtasia 2021, we actually added over 75 brand new transitions. Now, transitions are for two different pieces of media being joined together. Everything from fades or wipes or spins. All the transitions are found in this gigantic menu over here on the left. And I say gigantic because there's lots of them, right? Well, actually, this is where the drop-down menu at the top can help you out a little bit. And that is when you use the drop-down menu underneath transitions, you can go to different headings or different styles of transitions. For example, I'm a big fan of the wipe transition. So I'm going to click wipes. And this is going to show me just the wipe styles. And if I want a preview of what they look like, I can drag my mouse across it, the cursor across it, and you can kind of see what those might look like. Like this is a fan effect. So it looks like it's fanning down onto the bottom there. Or some of my favorites are some of these new ones like this paint arcs. I like how those look on my screen as well. So speaking of them being favorites of mine, this is where I'm going to start adding things to my favorites menu. If I find a tool, whether it's a transition or a call out that I want to use on the regular, I can hover over the one I like, locate the star in the upper right hand corner and click on it, changing it from white to yellow. And when it's yellow, it has been then added to my favorites menu so I can go back and find it really quickly. So I can go through and favorite a few of these that I use on a regular basis. Where's the square one? Cascading squares. I love these. So I have now added 4 different transitions to my favorites menu. If I go back to the annotations and I know I'm going to use this bubble, this arrow, and maybe my favorite tool, which is the spotlight tool, I can continuously add those in whenever I want to my favorites menu so that I have them available to me at any time. Next in the list is
Hey, Jason.
Hey, Ryan.
Do you need a drink of water?
I'm assuming we have some questions that have come.
They are coming in fast and furious. So I think I might ask you a couple that have to do with the media and library.
Okay.
So first of all, how do you get media content from the media bin to the library?
So I've got things here in my media bin and I want to add it to my library, right?
Yes.
Okay. So the easiest way, by no stretch, no means, the easiest way is to right click on the media in the media bin itself and choose the option that says add to library. When I do that, you're going to get this add to library menu that pops up, and it's going to remember whatever the last library you were in, if you want to add it to that, or by using the drop-down menu, you can select any number of other libraries as well. If you're going to do this and you want to add it to a new library that doesn't show up in this drop-down menu, my recommendation is to go into your library and create a new one so that it's available as a destination. This is really helpful, especially if you're someone who's creating a library or a group of library assets that's going to be used across a team or shared with other people, because you can export that library out. Ryan, our team does this on a regular basis, right? We actually have a library called Camtasia Tutorials. These are all of our arrows and cursors and start screens and intro screens for our tutorials. So if you watch a tutorial on our tutorial page, you're going to see some sort of this intro on all of our videos. Well, it's easy to create it once and add it to a library later on. So by far the easiest way is to right click from the media bin and add it to your library from there. If you happen to have added something to your timeline or to your video, like let's say this arrow and it's actually that big, once it's on the timeline, I can add it to my library the same way by right clicking on it, and then it happens to be the last option in that menu list. So I can add things to my library as often as I want.
Perfect. And there's actually just a question came in saying, can you share a library with your coworkers? Like you just mentioned, can
Yep.
you walk through that again? Like maybe that Camtasia tutorials folder, how would you share that with others?
Sure. So the thing about the library is you can do it in various ways. I can share individual pieces of media. Like if I wanted to do this orange arrow here, I can right click on it and export that asset as its own asset. It creates what's called a libzip or an libzip, a library zip file. What would happen is it would share it out to wherever you saved it. You'd share that item with someone. They would come into the library on their version of Camtasia and go to manage library and choose import zipped library. So those libzip files. So I can share them individually by right clicking on them. I can share an entire library by going to manage library and choose export library. And those could be pretty sizable depending on how big your library is. That's a second way. Ryan, if you're going to share, a library on a regular basis, my recommendation is to go to File, Export, and choose Package. This is a newer feature within the last couple of versions of Camtasia where I can actually go to my libraries and shop. Maybe I want to share the Camtasia 2021 one with you and the Audiate one in my bicycle workshop, and it would create a package file where I can add multiple things at once. Those are all great ways of sharing items from your library or entire library folders with other people.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And one more question, actually, as far as media goes, can you show them, Carol's asking what types of files can be imported. Can you kind of show them how they can see that?
Sure. If I click on the plus button in the lower left-hand corner of the media bin and choose import media, it's going to bring up a Windows Explorer dialog because I'm on a Windows machine. In the bottom right-hand corner where it says open and then there's a drop-down menu, when I click on all media type file types, let's make this a little bit smaller so you can see it. You'll actually see, oh geez, the list is really long. With that drop-down menu, you'll see all the supported media types that Camtasia will support. Everything from the image files, to the audio files, to video files and presentation file types. So these are all the current file formats that Camtasia supports.
Excellent. One final question that has to do with the recorder. Can I ask you that one before I turn you loose?
Sure.
So there were a lot of people saying that they were not seeing the capture and tools options at the top. Yep. I'm assuming that's just because they need to do an update. Do you remember what version of the updates?
I sure do. Okay. So if you have Camtasia 2021, which is going to be the one that has that new recorder in it, if you go up to the help menu and go check for updates, we just released a version 21.0.5, like 2 weeks ago, that has updated versioning of the recorder, which would have those menu options as well. What we're doing with the recorder especially is we're constantly iterating on it. We're making additions and making it a better user experience for our users. And we do that in terms of what are called maintenance and minor releases. So this is Camtasia 2021, right? But there are versions. So 21.0, that second number is called a minor update. And the third number is called a maintenance update. Everything after the 21, as long as you have Camtasia 2021 installed, you get all of the updates in the maintenance and minors free. So it should tell you that there's an update available, but it might be, if you're a regular Camtasia user, it might be a good habit to get into maybe on Monday mornings to go to the help menu and go to check for updates, and then it'll look at our servers and tell you whether or not a new version is available to you. We're doing it pretty regularly, so I encourage you to keep an eye out for those as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. Lots of questions still coming in, but I'm going to let you continue on with your presentation.
Sure, no problem. So the next thing we are going to go to is behaviors. So these are a ton of fun. Behaviors are designed for people that want the transition style effects and animation style effects, but they don't have a lot of time or knowledge on how to use the transitions, which are actually pretty easy, or animations. Behaviors are a combination of both. They are designed for text, but they can be used on different styles of of images. So you can see how they look by hovering over them. They're going to be some sort of actions where they have a behavior motion based on a position of the text or position of the imagery on your screen. Behaviors themselves are made up of three parts: an intro, a during, and an outro. And when you add a behavior to something on your screen, once again, those things show up in your properties panel so that you can make adjustments to them depending on what you want to use. And I will go over these as well in my getting started video, but we're actually going really short on time, so I want to get through a few more items as well. Speaking of animations, which are right below behaviors, animations come in two different flavors. They come in zooming and panning, which is used to zoom in to focus on parts of the screen and move around the screen without actually moving the media itself. And then animations in its other tab over here on the right, everything from creating opacity changes to restoring to a previous state, to scaling, to tilting, all those sorts of things come into play as well. What I tend to tell people, though, is I don't use any of these pre-built animations. I really don't. I use the custom animation because once you learn how to use that, which is actually not too hard to learn, and I do teach that in several different webinars as well as on our tutorial page. Once you learn how to use the custom animation, you can do any of these plus many, many more to get things like something to fly across the screen, to have something drop down. Most often, I'm using a custom animation when it's time for my webcam to go away from my recording. Maybe I want it to fade out. Maybe I want it to shrink down to the corner of the screen. I can do all those sorts of things with the custom animation. Next on the list, cursor effects. This is one of those underutilized ones as well, in my opinion. Cursor effects are just that. These are effects that you can add to your cursor that's been captured on the screen. One thing to note about Camtasia is it does capture your cursor wherever it happens to be on your screen. Now, this one on my recording, it's on my screen, but it's this tiny little arrow because I recorded on a really, really large monitor. You can kind of see it right there. If you select your screen recording and go over to that properties panel, this is just one of the many things it can do. With your screen recording selected, there's a tab on the top that is for your mouse. And you can actually scale up that mouse and change its opacity depending on where you want it on the screen and what use case it has. If you're using it to point things out in your recording and perhaps not using a call out or a zoom or anything like that, you have a lot of control over your mouse. And this is one thing that people ask, well, I want my mouse on the screen for certain times and I want it gone on other times. That's where you could use the scaling and the opacity. But if I want something else to happen with it, like a cursor effect, I can drag things like the highlight bubble right onto my screen recording and make adjustments to it. So if I want the mouse being followed around on my screen with a highlighter, I can do that as well. I can do a spotlight tool, a magnification tool. We even have cursor smoothing, which takes someone like me who talks a lot with their hands and moves their mouse around like crazy and smooths it out to make it a little bit more exacting and a little more polished and professional. We also have sound effects and different visual effects on the clicks themselves, on the right and left click, that you can explore depending on your use case in your video. We have voice narration within Camtasia. So you can actually do that silent recording we talked about at the beginning. Maybe we just wanted to record our screen and didn't want to record our voice at that time. You can actually come back later on, place your playhead wherever you want it, and hit start voice recording and do your voiceover work right here inside of Camtasia. This happens most often in our line of work where one person on the team is making the video, but they want someone else's voice on it. So they can actually send them the project with Camtasia. They can open it up in their version of Camtasia and do the voiceover. There's lots of different ways to do that workflow, but that is just one of the possibilities that comes into play. Speaking of voice or audio, we have audio effects as well. So these are your pretty typical audio effects that you would find in a video editor, everything from fading in and fading out. We do have clip speed capabilities, so you can speed up and slow down a speech. Something brand new to Camtasia 2021 is the audio emphasize tool. Emphasize allows you to take advantage of music that you would normally put in the background of your video. This allows you to drag the emphasize tool, the effect to your spoken word, so that the music itself drops down a little bit quieter, but you can still hear you along with the music without having to adjust levels and figure out, well, if I talk louder here, can I drop the music down here as well? All those sorts of things make a really compelling video by being able to use some of those music features. We have a visual effects tool tab. Lots going on in here. Everything from adding a border to your image to color adjustments to something that's brand new with that 21.0.5 release, which is color LUT, which is a lookup table, the ability to kind of say color grading. You can actually drag that onto something and have all kinds of, this is just an enhanced contrast to it right now, but you can find lots of free lookup table or LUT files on the internet to maybe give it a film noir look or a warmer look or a colder look. Think of it as image filters that you'd find in a lot of social media platforms. We have things like corner rounding, which is brand new to Camtasia 2021. We have device frames. Like if I wanted my webcam to look like it was on a computer monitor, or let's fix something else, a MacBook Pro. You could do that right within Camtasia as well, based on device frame capability over in the visual effects media. You can do interactive hotspots. You can do green screening, also known as remove a color. You can add motion blur, or even stuff new like the media matte, which is the ability to have a matting effect on your screen. All of these are covered in tutorials as well as upcoming webinars as well. Last but not least, in the tools area, we do have an interactive section that's designed for timelines in case of you wanted to use something like a table of contents or adding quizzing to your videos. Excuse me, that's all dependent on where the video gets hosted. Ryan, we are at about 15 minutes left in the hour. There's a couple more things I wanted to talk about in general. And then I was going to ask if you had anything that you would like covered. But things I want to teach people in general about Camtasia as they're getting themselves into creating projects is, do not deny yourself this little drop-down menu at the top of the screen. This drop-down menu gives you scaling capability of the canvas itself so that you can see in greater detail what's happening in your project. You can do things like detach your canvas. If you happen to be working on multiple monitors, you can take the canvas itself and put it on another monitor and then have all this extra space to work with your tracks. You can also, at the bottom of the drop-down menu, have a project settings section that tells you what the canvas dimensions are themselves. So this will tell you what the size you're editing in. Most of us here at TechSmith, when we're making tutorials, actually edit in 720p to give it a nice crisp finish. But there's lots of different editing styles and dimensions based on different places you may want to share the video later on. You can also change your canvas color and pick different frame rates for your video production as well. Ryan, I'm going to guess that we've got a few more questions that have come in. And that being the case, I want to put one more pitch out to people before we answer those questions, in that I am doing those conversations around whether or not how you use Camtasia in your learning environment and how you're using it in your company. If it's something you're interested in learning more about or talking with me about, I encourage you to fill out this form that I just put in the chat. You could, if it works out well, be eligible for me to give you and your team a Camtasia training session. So if you have a few moments to fill that out, I really appreciate it. Ryan, I'm going to sip some water. Hit me with the questions.
All right, here we go. So one of them, Melinda asked, if you record from another platform, like so let's say you bring in another recording from like Microsoft Teams or something like that, yep, can you still use cursor effects and sizing the mouse and things like that?
That's a great question. So the magic inside of Camtasia of using the Camtasia recorder to record your screen is that we record capture a lot of metadata like the position of where the mouse is on the screen, how fast it's moving, its size, its opacity. The ability for us to add things like cursor effects, or the ability for us to scale up the mouse cursor itself, all comes from the ability that we can extract from our own personal recordings. If you bring in an MP4 from another location that was sourced however you sourced it, we cannot do that with its mouse because we weren't able to be the ones that captured all that recording cursor data. If that was the case, and I was using an external piece of media, a recording from somewhere else, maybe a webinar, maybe a Zoom webinar, a Teams call, whatever it happens to be, I would then rely on the ability to zoom in or pan around or add callouts to draw attention as I would normally do with a cursor effect itself. It takes a little bit of practice, but then you're not limited by not being able to have recorded the actual presentation yourself, and you can use that external media from some other location.
Awesome. So kind of along this line here with that highlighted cursor.
Yeah.
Walter asked a really good question, is when you add an effect like that, is it applied to the whole frame, the whole video, or can you adjust it so it's only visible during a certain portion of time?
Let's pick a visual effect. That's a great question. I'm gonna say goodbye to my cursor highlight because I just don't use that often. So for example, a visual effect, if we go to visual effects and I wanted to use that device frame per se, if I drag it onto my screen recording, it applies that device frame to the entire recording as a piece of media at once. If I only wanted it on a small section of the recording, what I would do is I would actually come down onto the timeline and maybe make a split, make a selection so that I broke it into two individual pieces. So now if I apply that device frame to just that front section, now the video has a screen recording that looks like it's on that desktop, but then when I switch to the next piece of media, it disappears. Now I might soften that with some sort of transition, maybe zooming in or something like that. But you can change it so that it only affects a piece of media that you have selected. If it were a cursor effect, cursor effects will act a little differently. For example, if I wanted to drag the spotlight cursor down onto my timeline, and let's make it really, really big, it shows up in what's called a drawer. And the drawer is right here at the bottom of the media itself. If I click on this little caret, this little arrow, it shows that spotlight tool. It has a range selector on it. So I can actually click and drag so that it only shows up at certain points. So if I'm playing my video along, as soon as the playhead hits it, then boop, I have my spotlight, and then boop, it's gone based on where I've selected. Sorry, I added those sound effects, Ryan.
Are those sound effects included with Camtasia?
No, those are custom JSON sound effects on the fly. Sorry.
Very cool. All right. Thank you for answering that.
Sure.
This is Paul asked a question that I think could benefit everyone. He says, can you touch on the easiest way to eliminate the ums or coughs or any sound you don't want included?
Twofold, Paul. The easiest way is actually utilizing another TechSmith tool called TechSmith Audiate. It's where you can record yourself as an audio recorder, and you can make edits as if you were editing a document. There's actually a feature in Audiate, which is a separate product, a separate paid product that can eliminate ums and ahs. If it's me and I don't have Audiate, my recommendation is to go through, because this happens to me often, is I actually zoom in on my recording, select the recording part of my video that has the spoken word. In this case, it's my webcam. And as long as I have the audio tab checked, which is over here in the properties panel in the upper right-hand corner, and I see that audio wave files, I go in and use the selection tool, find where that ah, or cough is, and then click and drag the audio down in that section to eliminate, because that is the volume level of the recording. So if I were to play this video back, silence, and then to the tutorials and training page, and you simply need, so that's actually my recording. So I can make a selection with the selection tool and just pull out small sections of that recording. That's the quickest way to do it. It does take some time. The other thing is to see, I just did it myself, is to operate from a script. And if you're reading the script, there's less of a chance to get ums and ahs in your recording. But if you're like me and you record on the fly, ums and ahs also give it a human element.
I think an important tip there that you mentioned, Jason, too, is zooming in on your timeline.
Yes, right up here.
Because that really stretches out the waveform, and you can see kind of where the starts and ends and things like that. So,
yeah, you'll get to know your waveforms and your ahs and your coughs. Like I know this is my hello. I just know it is. Hello. Yep. I just know it's this weird looking mountain waveform that I just know that's the way I say hello based on audio waveform drawing. So,
all right. One final question before I let you continue. Donald asked, can you take, when you mentioned earlier about adding stuff from your timeline to your library, can you take just a piece of a video and put that into your library? Like if you wanted to reuse something in a future project.
Oh, interesting. So if I wanted to take this section of my video and use it in my library later on, okay. If I use the selection tool, which I've done by taking the playhead and dragging the red or green tabs to the left or the right to make a selection on my timeline, which is going to capture everything on that timeline as long as it's not hidden or anything like that. As long as I make a selection and I right click in that selection area, one of the options is to add timeline selection to the library. So I can actually take a long form video and save out multiple pieces for use later on. Another quick tip while we're in here is you can also produce just those small little sections as well. So if you have an hour-long webinar, but you want to break it up into 10 little sections, you can do that by just clicking and dragging your selection tool on the timeline and making those selections and producing them out as well. Good questions.
Perfect. I think that's all I've got for right now. I may have a couple more in a minute.
Okay. Well, we're actually, Ryan, we're at time. We've made it. We thought this was going to be a short little webinar, but people are asking great questions and we didn't actually get through everything we wanted to. One thing I will note is that many people in this session are indicating that they are on Macs and using Camtasia for Mac. While it's very similar, it's not exactly the same. If you posted those questions and you post those questions in the survey, I will do my best and our team will do our best to get those questions answered for you for Mac specific use cases. And then if you really would like to see a Mac specific webinar, let us know about that as well. So Ryan, I'll say if we've got time for another, probably one, possibly two questions. Otherwise, we may want to call it an afternoon.
I guess one question, and I'm going to ask it. Terry asked, why is track 1 always slightly longer than track 2? So if you look on your timeline, and I think this has to do with when you stop the recording, is it probably the how it stops the webcam first and then it stops the screen recording?
Yeah, I mean, we've got Mr. O'Rourke in our support group. So if he's actually hearing this, maybe Dave can chime in. Yeah, so when Camtasia starts and stops the recordings, it does it in succession. It's quick successions, right? It stops the screen recorder, microphone, and camera. But we're always wondering, Dro's listening, we're wondering why more often than not, the screen recording tends to be slightly longer on the timeline than other pieces of media like my webcam and my audio. So in this case, it's about 16 frames longer. So we'll see if Dro can get us that answer if he happens to hear it. But that's typically it. It's the order of operation as things get stopped. We don't want to miss anything. So they'll clip the recording of the screen because that's where people intend to typically stop the recording, is on what's happening. And then it rolls off the microphone and camera as well.
You guys hear me?
Slightly, Dro. You're a little quiet.
All right. I'll just try and speak up.
There you go.
So the recording is done on multiple threads. So the audio is recorded on a different thread than the screen, for example. Same with the camera is also recorded on a separate thread. So when we stop, they don't all stop immediately at the same time. Especially webcams have a lot of lag, a lot of delay. So Camtasia does stop them all, but we don't trim them all. So what you see in the editor is the actual length of the various streams inside of the recording.
Gotcha. Thank you, Dro. We appreciate that. See, this is why we hang around with really smart people, and Dave happens to be one of the lead developers on the Camtasia team. So it's always good to have the people in the know, right?